Welcome back, YouTube viewers, to my channel, Survive and Thrive. And today, I wanted to cover some of the more speculative companies out there that you can invest in. And biotechnology is one of those that is very volatile, so there is a lot of money to be gained if you're positioning yourself at the right entry points. And for me personally, a lot of this has been based on pure luck. But I have done enough research to at least have an understanding of how each company I invest in makes their money and what their future vision is. And the company I wanted to focus on today is Novavax, ticker symbol NVAX. So just to talk a little bit about my personal journey, I was watching a video when President Trump was in office, and this was back in March of 2020. And he was talking a lot about the vaccine efforts, the companies out there that the government was working with. And Novavax was one of those that was mentioned, as well as everybody knows Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson. And so I already had a position built out with Pfizer, and I did some more research into Novavax, and I saw that the way that they were coming up with their vaccine effort was built a lot on a differentiator with more of a protein-based antibody as opposed to the mRNA like the other vaccines were pursuing. So I bought a position, looking back, a lot smaller than I should have, but a lot of this was built off speculation. So my entry point was around $10 cost basis. And ever since, I've just bought and held that initial position. And within a few months, we started to see a lot of catalysts starting to come together for Novavax. July 2020, the US government awarded Novavax $1.6 billion for the vaccine effort. And this was part of the Operation Warp Speed. And so you can see, like I mentioned, that going back to when I started to buy in, this is $8.40, but I was just a little bit before that, so it was around the $10 mark, like I mentioned. And then you started to see these catalysts within a few months, which really started to make this jump. And you get into July, and they're around the $80 to $82 mark. And then you start to see more news, like this article here, June 4th, 2020. There's the Department of Defense contract, $60 million funding for manufacturing of that vaccine. But at the time, they're still going through their clinical trials, so nothing is written in stone. They're just setting up a lot of potential clients and contracts with the government and elsewhere. And so one of the countries that they contracted with was the UK, 60 million doses. That was in August of 2020. When you look into August, as we get into that month, we start to see a real high peak at that time. If you look at the historical chart at $170 per share. And so for me personally, I'm watching all this and, part of me is thinking, should I take some of my profits at this point? But I also think that the company is still developing. This is very new for them, and there are some huge catalysts that continue to develop. You start hearing about them making contracts with potentially the Serum Institute in India, South Korea, as well as other countries. And it just seems like a lot of upward movement. But then also, as you can see, where it peaked here in August of 2020, there was a fairly significant drop. And so I think that a lot of investors at that point, knowing that there's still a lot of speculation because there's actually not a vaccine that's been produced and they haven't passed any of their clinical trials, that a lot of the big time investors, as well as some of the retail investors, took some of those profits off the table, which is not bad and probably something that I should have considered. But based off of the position I had, I didn't really need the money. And I thought that Novavax still had room to grow. So then, like I said, around that time, a few months later into the year, as this article mentions from the New York Times, into October, you start to see Maryland company, which has never brought a vaccine to market, has started its phase 3 trial in the UK, with plans to begin in the United States in October. And so you can start to see that, like I said, it drops significantly. People are taking profits off the table. And, there's, I guess, probably some doubt with some people's perspective because, like it says, this is a company that's, been around for a long time, but hasn't really produced anything. And so I know, even talking to a lot of my friends who had positions in this company, that they did the same. They started taking their profits. They started actually completely selling out of their position. And for me personally, I still thought that there was potential. And so I stood steady and I continued to hold. And as you can see, as we get further into 2020, and just as we get into the first part of 2021, there's a huge boost in catalyst that really spikes this stock. And as you can see here from the University of Maryland, which just so happens to be the same state that Novavax is located in, Gaithersburg, Maryland. This article states from the university, Novavax vaccine demonstrates strong immune response. And once people started to see this news, it really did drive up very aggressively the share valuation. And it's been a crazy ride for me, but I continue to just think about that moment when that happened. And it was just amazing to see how quickly and how fast investors jumped in and wanted to support this company. And then we started to hear news, like I mentioned, into January, into February, like that article mentions. And it gets up to just under $300, $290. Just amazing to think about for a company that I started with at $10 a share. And in such a short time, less than a year. And at that time, there was also mentions of its equivalent efficacy compared to Pfizer and Moderna, and being as equal, if not better, as well as having some clinical data and results on the South Africa variant, which was not a very great efficacy, but it still showed that it had effectiveness against even the variants which had been untested by Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson. Now the problem became that, like I said, there's been a lot of good catalysts and upward momentum in their favor. But as soon as we get past this spike here and we see this turbulence of the downward spiral and even further volatility, is due to the fact that, like I said, they still haven't produced anything. And so once Novavax started to try and get their clinical trials here completed for phase 3 in the United States, but then there were also articles starting to come out about delays, then that's when people became really concerned and investors started to pull out. And for me, I really try to control my emotions, because I know that, especially with biotechs, they can respond very quickly, upward or downward, with news, even just one article or a couple articles. And so when they started mentioning the delays, I continued to hold when a lot of people did sell out. But you started to see that it dropped down from that 290 down to 174, then had another significant drop off here going into the month of May, as low as $130 per share. So yeah, it makes sense that you see this article from Reuters from May 10th. Novavax delays timelines for vaccine regulatory filings and production. And that was the other issue that started to come up a few months before this, was in their discussions with the Serum Institute of India. There were discoveries about getting the necessary materials to be able to even produce the vaccine for the number of doses, multi-millions, depending on which country you're talking about, and having enough vials and other materials that were required to produce on such a large scale. And so from that $130 low in mid-May, it has come back up to over 200 in the last week. And then it started to sell off a little bit. It's at 174, almost $175. I'm still way up on my initial position and cost basis. And even now, I know that within the next month or so that we're going to hear some other news and potential catalysts. And if they really do get a emergency use authorization approval from the United States, as well as being able to produce this vaccine in other countries, then my thought is that they haven't heard their best news yet, and that's what I continue to maintain and support. There are other variables at play, such as their NanoFlu, which they've already been approved years ago with the FDA for their phase 3, as well as being able to apply for licensure. But the vaccine related to the pandemic has been their main focus. Now, they do also have a combined vaccine that I've heard they were working on, and then they have had some results come out here recently within the last few weeks. And it's for NanoFlu and the pandemic vaccine. So very interesting to see how they're looking ahead and also trying to build support with not just the United States, but other countries, which a lot of the other vaccine competitors haven't made necessarily the same efforts. And then their CEO, Stanley Erck, mentioned in a interview the other week that the booster shot really was their main goal for the pandemic vaccine. And so that is going to be something that's going to come into play, because even with Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, they're saying that potentially every 6 months to once a year, just like you would with the flu shot, is going to be required. And so there's potential for long-term revenue and sales that Novavax has never seen. And you compare a almost $13 billion market cap company to the likes of Pfizer, who's, probably over 200 billion in market cap. And just understanding that Pfizer, for as long as they've been around as well, is at the $34 to $38 per share. And right now we're sitting at $174 with Novavax. That once they start producing and really start to make strides in bringing in real revenue, that this could be a $300 plus share to $400 per share company. And it's just crazy to think, but like I said, this roller coaster of a investment has surprised me quite a few times. And so I'm going to continue to monitor the news and developments as they come along with Novavax. And I'm hopeful that I can continue to hold this one long term. But if I see any signs of weakness or potential for them to not come out as successful at the end, then I'll probably be looking to at least exit out of half of my position, if not completely. So this is one that I'll continue to update over the next few months, but I wanted to share a little bit of my insight and thoughts about Novavax. Make sure if you've gained any knowledge from this video that you hit that like button. It really does help out the search function and the algorithms for people to learn about specific stocks, in this case Novavax. And I'm continuing to provide weekly videos related to stocks, financial strategies, and the cryptocurrency space. So if those are areas of focus in your investment portfolio that you'd like to learn more about, make sure that you subscribe and turn on that bell and follow me for more free financial education. Take advantage of time and compounding your growth. Make it a great week, and don't just survive, thrive.